So, today I wanted to talk about probably my least favorite teacher that I have ever had. Shoot the diamond to open the gate. Okay, where that diamond? Oh, okay. So this teacher and I did not get along. I was probably in year 9. I was probably about 14, emotions completely not under control. I was in the height of my social anxiety, and I was just really, really struggling. And this teacher did not help. While I do have, wow, this is hard without to find. While I do have complaints about the actual class itself, like the fact that we would get distracted talking about things that I'm not going to say on YouTube because I don't think they'd be monetization friendly. Not that I'm monetized, but you know, I would like to not trigger anyone. We talked about that instead of, classwork, which bothered me. I didn't like that. But my main complaint about her is what she said to me and what she said about me, which, in my opinion, was very unprofessional. So, this started when we had an assessment that we were supposed to be working on. Now, this teacher was notorious for giving people lots and lots of assessments. We didn't get much help on them. It was assessment after assessment. Pretty much, we were constantly working on an assessment. And often she hadn't really described what we were supposed to actually be doing. So this particular time, she was calling everyone in the class up one by one to check what they'd done, and I was seeing some of the toughest, most emotionally strong people in the class walk away shattered from this. I don't entirely remember that, but my mother has assured me that that is how I described the situation to her, making sure there's not a chest I missed. So I was understandably a little nervous, especially recognizing that I was emotionally fragile that day. I probably should have used this last time, and I didn't, so I don't think I'm going to need it. I was shaking by the time she called me up, and I put my palms on the desk to push myself up because my knees were weak and I needed that extra stabilization in order to stand up and walk to the front of the room. I knew everyone was going to be watching me because I was going to be moving, and because when someone goes up to the front to go talk to the teacher, everyone glances up from their work. That really bothered me. Social anxiety is awful, and I could not handle the knowledge that everyone was going to be watching me. I found myself really shaky. My knees buckled as I stood up, and I sort of sat back down just slightly to recompose myself. I hadn't even gotten out of my chair yet, and she must have yelled at me or insulted me or something. It's really blurry. But I made a decision right then and there that I did not have to give in to that. I've always sort of had a problem with authority figures, especially authority figures who think themselves better than me for no particular reason. So I calmly sat at the desk. I mean, it was calmly for me. I think I was crying. I'm pretty sure I was crying, but it was less crying because I was nervous and more crying because I didn't know how to stop crying. And I think she yelled at me in front of everyone. And probably sent me up to the office. I don't have much recollection of what happened during that time because it was very, very emotional. And also, it was probably 4 or so years ago at this point. That was not great. That's not a great thing for anyone to do in a position of power, especially to somebody who you have a responsibility of care for. The director of middle school, which I was in middle school at the time, so basically the person in charge of my year, came up to me and basically accused me of lying, said the story from my teacher's perspective, where apparently I had collapsed into a fetal position on the ground, sobbing under the chair and refusing to do what she asked. And for some reason, the director of middle school thought that that was an okay thing for a teacher to do to a student. I argued that that's not what happened. I seem to be really, really stuck on this bit. I argued that that is not what happened. I had multiple witnesses. Anyone in the class, even the people who didn't like me, could attest that I was not under the table in the fetal position, sobbing on the floor. But for some reason, I still got in trouble for it. So Parent-Teacher Day rolls around, where the parents and the teachers meet up, discuss how the kid is doing in their class. This teacher did not request a meeting for me. She did not seem to want to talk to my parents. We requested a meeting for her because I had talked to my parents about how much I was struggling in that class and the difficulties I was having with this teacher, and they did not want to let that stand. Now, my parents are quite friendly and understanding people, and they wanted to hear both sides of the story while they believed me wholeheartedly, and they assured me that no matter what, they would take my side. They just wanted to hear both sides of the story. They wanted to give the teacher a chance to defend herself and to say that from her perspective, it wasn't really as bad as I was making it out to be. And no matter what, oh, I can jump up here. No matter what, they were going to try and solve the problem for me. They were going to try and find a solution that worked for me. But if I was overreacting, then that's something that can be worked on. Me knowing that is something that could conceivably help. Trying to figure out where to go here. Okay. It's probably not what I was supposed to do. Oh, that's hard. We showed up to parent-teacher night. My parents we showed up, waited at her table, and I was really nervous because one of my other friends who had their parents request an interview with this teacher because of similar reasons, basically the teacher bullying or being unfair to the student, came up to me in distress right after their meeting and said she just turned my parents against me. They came in fully believing me, and by the end of it, they were totally on her side and telling me that I was in the wrong. And I told my parents that. They once again assured me that they would not do that, but you know, I was understandably a little bit nervous hearing that she was apparently quite good at this manipulation thing. So my parents come, how am I supposed to do this? They sit down, in the car over, my father had said that he was not sure he was going to be able to entirely control himself. He might get a little emotional, a little angry, and that we should pull him back if he seemed to be going a little too hard against the teacher. And by that I mean, My parents are both very, very skilled at debating, at arguing. My father works in the mental health industry and is used to talking to narcissists and manipulators. He has skills to deal with those. He wanted to make sure that we were being fair to the teacher and that he wasn't getting caught up in his perceptions of the situation, which my mother and I agreed to do. So we sit down, and the teacher starts off by saying, we have not even told her what this meeting is about yet. She starts off by saying, look, I don't like Sheolora, and Sheolora doesn't like me. Which is a wild thing for a high school teacher to say about one of their students. So at that point, my mother decides that actually this teacher does not deserve a second chance, because clearly she is the problem here if her response to parents requesting an interview with her about their student is, I don't like this student, and that is why we have problems. So my mother, who spent her entire high school experience in the debating club and now works part-time as an adjudicator for one of the local debating clubs, meaning that she has very, very good argumentative techniques, starts talking to the teacher about, all of the issues, all of the reasons that is not an okay thing to say about a student to whom you have a responsibility of care, a duty of care. Because it's really not. Is this where I'm supposed to be going? Is there anywhere else to go? I don't think there's anywhere else to go. I'm very confused. So, the main argument that my mother has, she still wanted to hear my teacher's perspective of the specific event where supposedly I collapsed to the floor. The teacher told it pretty much how the head of middle school had told it, which was that I collapsed to the floor, sobbing in the fetal position underneath my desk. She added that I had slammed my hands on the desk, in like an act of violence or something, and that would probably be when I gently placed my hands on the desk to help push myself up, because my legs were very shaky from, the anxiety. So that wasn't great, but my mother, bless her heart, had the best argument for that. She said to my teacher, so under your duty of care, you charged your student, my child, you brought them to the brink of tears. You brought them to the point where they were sobbing on the floor in a fetal position, according to you, regardless of whether or not that is actually what happened. That is what you claim to have happened. You got to that point with your duty of care. And then what was your solution? Did you help them? Did you give them space? Did you make sure that there was a safe and welcoming environment? No, my teacher admitted to the fact that she yelled at me and made me cry when I was supposedly, in her opinion, sobbing uncontrollably on the floor. Yeah, we've been there. I'm so confused to where we're supposed to go. This is clearly where we're supposed to end up, right? Like, this is where we're supposed to be. Maybe it's not. Maybe we go here. Oh my goodness. That makes so much sense. I've never done the honey slide before, because that was way too difficult and I couldn't find anywhere to go. Okay, I feel better about that. Apologies for banging my head against a wall repeatedly. Where am I headed here? Here? Okay. Change of scenery. That's really nice. I like that. So, I have to start wrapping up this story soon because it's going on a little long. We've heard most of the important points. So my mother is very impassionately talking about why what my teacher did is not okay as somebody with a duty of care. And she is my mother is the sort of person, in fact both of my parents are, and by virtue of that me, to talk entirely with their hands. So think memes about Italians, always talking with their hands, large emphatic gestures, especially when she's trying to make her point. She has sweeping gestures, open hands so that it's not an act of violence. My mother, it should be noted, is in fact a pacifist, so she's really not a violent person. But she takes medication that makes her hands shake uncontrollably, especially when she's emotional. This is a normal thing to her, to everyone who's used to talking to her, but my teacher doesn't know that. So as far as my teacher is concerned, my mother is shaking with rage and flinging her hands about, while very impassionately, but calmly, explaining why my teacher has messed up under the duty of care and should not be entrusted to be my teacher anymore. Because my teacher fully admitted to making me cry. And there is a point where my mother's hand goes a little too far over the table. It would have brushed against the top of my teacher's laptop screen. Well, not brushed against it, just gone over the laptop screen. And I see my teacher flinch. And I look over to my dad, make eye contact with him with the, "We were supposed to pull you back if you got too far over the edge. Should we pull her back?" And my dad looks back at me, and as one, we lean back in the chair and continue to let my mother tear my teacher apart for the next 3 minutes, as she is very calmly and very reasonably explaining to my teacher all of the logical fallacies that my teacher has used, and how any good, respectable teacher should not do that to their children. That was very interesting, very amusing. I do feel a little bad about my teacher, but after that, my teacher didn't really mess with me. My mother and my father talked to my teacher and made there be a few rules and agreements for how I was to be dealt with in the class if I was getting very anxious. We came up with a signal to let my teacher know when I needed her to back off. And because I am very passive-aggressive and like holding my ground, I sort of liked the almost cosmic karma that came from the signal for me needing space being placing my hands on the desk. Because that is what I got in trouble for. Me placing my palms on the desk to push myself up, which she supposedly turned into banging my fists against the desk. That was the symbol I chose for, no, really, I need some time right now, I just need to breathe. We ended up moving me out of that teacher's class eventually. I'm really struggling with this lava, huh? The school, I made it through that term, but the school tried to put me back with that teacher, and I was not okay with that. I gave her a little bit, but I was finding myself really anxious in those classes. I could not have my back to her because I did not feel safe. And I was aware that this was my anxiety speaking. I was aware that the teacher was not actually going to do anything to harm me, but I was still put in a position of fear where I did not feel safe in the classroom. I could not focus very well under those conditions. And the constant assessments and not much actual classwork did not work well for me. So I moved into a different class and everything was fine. But at the end, one of my last days in her class, the students, some of her favorite students, asked her who her least favorite student in the class was. They asked who her favorite is, and she's like, "Oh, I can't pick favorites. You're all my favorite." and she was looking at the group who had her as their favorite teacher. For some reason, I really didn't get along with those people. And then they asked her, well, who's your least favorite in the class? Who do you hate? And she looked directly at me, I swear. She looked directly at me and said, oh, I don't dislike any of you. I don't hate any of you. After telling my parents to their faces, to my face, that she and I disliked each other, which is why they didn't get along. Which, by the way, I'd never told her that I disliked her. She just assumed. So, moral of the story, there is always something you can do against people who are in a position of power, who abuse that power against you, even if it is just not taking care of you when they should be. There are always people who will be on your side. I had multiple friends willing to testify that what happened to me was in fact what happened to me, that she was the one overreacting and that she was lying about what I did. And my parents were on my side, which is amazing. And overall it worked out okay, but it is not okay for teachers to do that, to make you cry and feel unsafe in their workspace, and B, to lie about your reactions to their inappropriate behavior. And there is always something you can do. It will work out okay. It worked out okay for me. But I don't know, I think this is just one of my favorite stories. Oh, by the way, after the parent-teacher interview, we made it back to the car. And as we were entering the car, my dad and I burst into laughter, and we said, she was so scared of you, to my mum. And we explained that the teacher had flinched, which my mother had not noticed. And that the teacher probably didn't know about Mum's shaky hands, and so thought she was really angry. And my mother, the pacifist, said, oh my gosh, we have to go back and apologize. We didn't let her do that. No, we hauled her into the car and drove away, and we were like, you're not apologizing. That had the perfect effect. We're not going to have problems with that teacher anymore for at least a while, and you cannot go back on that effect by going back and apologizing. Which, I don't know, this is one of my favorite stories, even though it really sucked at the time it was happening. I've talked for a long time now, so I think this is where we're going to end it. I'll pick up here next time. Next time I do a little ramble, I'll be in this area. I really like it with the roses and the rose bushes and the lilacs. These are some of my favorite flowers. And it looks like a really fun parkour, even if I am pretty much stuck on it right now. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye!